The only thing harder than writing a good story is writing a good ending to that story. Creating a long-running narrative that keeps an audience engrossed and entertained in its plot and characters for a sustained period of time, that's one thing. But wrapping up those plot lines and character arcs in a way that both satisfies the fans and conveys the greater message that you as the writer are trying to get across is a feat rarely achieved. How many times have you started watching a series or reading a manga and gotten hooked and invested almost instantly, only to have the entire story sputter out halfway through and limp to the finish line? Or maybe like 95% of a story was everything you wanted, only for the very last chapter to completely pull the rug out from under you and take everything in the worst direction possible at the last second. It's happened many times before, and unfortunately, it will definitely happen many times again. But the recurring failures of many series help to make the rare successes of others shine even brighter. And that's what brings us to the topic of this video. The Death Note anime came out in the mid-2000s. I was basically still a kid back then, which meant that if a show didn't involve a colorful cast of superpowered teenagers beating up one-dimensional bad guys with the power of friendship and yelling out their corny-ass signature moves every 5 minutes, I probably wasn't interested. Despite that, though, Death Note still managed to hold my attention back in those days, and I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that it was one of the first non-action anime that I ever really liked. The main reasons I believe so many people like myself gravitated towards Death Note was because 1, most people my age had never really seen something like that before, and the concept is sort of objectively interesting. And 2, the show did an amazing job of making the mental warfare between Light and L feel as intense and adrenaline pumping as your standard shonen tournament fight. Honestly, I don't think any series has successfully replicated that feeling since, or at least not to the level of quality and consistency that Death Note did. When people speak about their favorite parts of Death Note, they usually refer to the first half of the story, the battle between Light and L, and even though this video is about the ending of the series, I have to agree that the arc of the first 20 or so episodes is definitely superior to the arc of the last few. That being said, in my opinion, if the show had just ended with L's death at the end of the first arc and Light had gotten his way and became the reigning, undisputed god of the new world, I don't think I would love the show nearly as much as I ended up loving it today. We get to see Light triumph over and over and over and over again, with any losses he might have taken along the way feeling pretty minor in the grand scheme of things because he always overcame them soon after. In the ending, we finally see Light take a true L.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
That he can't recover from. And watching a genius, obsessive-compulsive perfectionist sociopath with an enormous god complex have an extreme mental breakdown is horrifyingly euphoric. One of the reasons I like Death Note so much is that, for the most part, it's a really chill show that depicts well-dressed people talking in very expensive rooms about very important things, but every now and then it just gets intense as right when it needs to shake things up.
I'll take a potato chip and eat it.
This finale is legitimately unhinged in its explosiveness and raw emotion. The cartoonish Tarantino levels of blood that spurt out of Mikami when he offed himself was utterly ridiculous, and all of the screaming and shouting and shooting and crying, it's pretty insane to think that 90% of the final episode is just one conversation that takes place in an abandoned hangar. Speaking of Mikami, Mikami is not only the most underappreciated character in the series, he's the saving grace of the second half of Death Note. The episode that introduces him is one of my favorite episodes in the show, and even though he's criminally underutilized, his presence is constantly felt for the rest of the story as this random wild card that the audience is never quite sure of when or how he'll be used. And when he does make his big entrance in the finale, he more than makes up for his lack of screen time previously. In my eyes, Mikami represents Light's carnivorous and bloodthirsty nature that's always locked up inside. He's a reflection of Light's true savagery, finally riled up by a worthy mental competitor in Nier for the first time in years. When Mikami is first introduced, he seems to be even more unassuming and emotionless than Light, but in the last 2 episodes, his inner demons are revealed, and it mirrors Light's quick descent into madness perfectly. In the span of about 5 minutes, you get to see Mikami go from the highest of highs, meeting the man that he reveres as a god, to the lowest of lows, finding out that that god he revered is actually just a power-crazed psycho and literally killing himself in the most violent way possible. This man really killed himself out of embarrassment, and it's hilarious. It's really sad and unsettling, sure, but definitely more funny than anything else.
Watch this, Lise. You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half.
I don't know this guy!
Throughout the entire series so far, we've usually been privy to either Light's secret plan or the plans of Light's enemies, but for this final showdown between Light and Nier, we're given their basic strategy with none of the juicy details. That makes the outcome completely unpredictable in a very refreshing way. Some people have theorized that Nier actually used the Death Note himself to manipulate Light into doing exactly what he wanted, and if that's true, then I see that as kind of a perfect way of Light finally getting caught, because Light himself has used that method of manipulation so many times to his own advantage. It's pretty great full circle writing. But anyways, everything goes to shit for Light once he's exposed, and Matsuda fills him full of lead like that one dude from the beginning of Blade 2.
Sick reference though, bro. Oh, thanks, bud.
And Light somehow is able to flee from his pursuers after this. The sequence at the end of Light frantically running for his life in the last episode while he has flashbacks of his younger self calmly walking home and reading the Death Note for the first time is amazing stuff. And once Light is lying dead at the feet of the staircase and Ryuk is explaining that he told Light how all of this would happen when they first met years ago, it's just gravy on top of an already amazing feast of a finale. And that final image of Light lying motionless on the stairs and looking off into the distance and just seeing the apparition of L peek his head out from behind the wall.
Boy, did I love all of that. Yes!
I love this.
After a lifetime of privilege, including being blessed with the Death Note and the intelligence to do as he pleased with it, Light is finally bested, and it's due to his own hubris. But despite this defeat, he still achieved everything he set out to do. He changed the world in a way that many would say was for the better, and he was able to rule over this world as its god from the shadows for years. I also love that the audience is given pretty much no indication about how the death of Kira will affect the world, but all that matters is that it did change the world while Light was alive, and in the grand scheme of things, what more could he ask for? Well, probably being alive and not dead. Yeah, that's probably the thing you would ask for. And if you really want to dig deeper with the added tidbits about Misa's annoying ass jumping off a building and killing herself after Light dies, Light being reborn as a Shinigami and being able to spend an eternity with Ryuk on his world as a true god of death, that just adds to an already pretty perfect climax of Death Note's story. Put a chef's kiss on that. It's close to impossible to control when, how, or why things in our lives end. But it is possible to control how we react to those endings. Possible, but not necessarily easy. Most things worth having in life rarely are easy. Finding contentment in bitter ends is one of the hardest things to do, but for the sake of your own sanity in dealing with the trials that you will undoubtedly face in this life, it's absolutely necessary. For better or worse, all things, good and bad, will eventually end. Don't become so attached with the things and relationships in your life that you couldn't stand to lose them. We're all here for a finite amount of time, and as scary as that may seem, it's really a blessing. It's an opportunity to make the most out of every second you draw breath on this planet. Who knows what you could attain? Just like Light Yagami, the entire world could end up in your hands. Just don't be surprised when your time comes and it all slips away.